It is an honor for me to introduce today's Kunzendorf lecturer, Tvrdy. Aaron is a UNL architecture graduate and a Nebraska native who started his career at HDR in Chicago and found his way into co-founding, owning, and operating Icon Modern in 2007. Icon Modern is full-service custom fabrication company specializing in commercial furniture and architectural elements with a sustainability focus. Aaron is here today because of the generous gift given by the Kunzendorf family, some of which are with us now, and who have asked that we take a moment to honor their family's story. So, on behalf of Robert and Diane, I will share this letter. We, the children of Godfrey Kunzendorf and Roberta Kunzendorf, have endowed this lecture series to encourage and support the study of furniture design at the University of Nebraska. Godfrey Gerhard Hermann Kunzendorf, known to Lincolnites as Zeke Kunzendorf, was born in Hooper, Nebraska. Mabel Roberta Kunzendorf, born Mabel Roberta Valentiner, and known to Lincolnites as Bert, was born and raised in Lincoln's College View neighborhood. After he graduated from Lincoln High and enrolled in the University of Nebraska's College of Business, and after she graduated from College View High School, they worked and met at Gold's department store in Lincoln. She was a sales associate in women's apparel and a model in fashion shows at Gold's until they were married in 1949, and he was a furniture buyer for Gold's until it was sold in 1965. His continuing success as a furniture buyer in Washington, D.C., and her enduring interest in the aesthetics, the quality, and the coordination of fabrics led them in 1969 to build the Centra House of Furniture, their co-owned and conjointly operated furniture store in Central Florida. In honor of our parents' lifelong interest in furniture's form and function, in recognition of their Nebraska roots and their lifelong loyalty to the Cornhuskers, and in loving memory of both of them, we have endowed the biennial Godfrey and Roberta Kunzendorf Lecture on Furniture Design. With no further ado, I will introduce Aaron Tvrdy.
Thank you.
Please welcome him.
How's the volume? Can you hear me? A little bit better? All right, so first I'd like to thank the Kunzendorf family. I got to go to lunch with most of you today, and it's an honor to be here, and thank you again for making all of this possible. It sounds like your parents and your grandparents were a very talented group of people, and talking to you, so are you guys. So it was great to go to lunch with you. I'd like to thank the university for inviting me. I'd like to thank all the students for showing up 4 p.m. on a Friday. I expected about half as many people. And this is kind of, it was funny to walk into Architecture Hall because I went to school a long time ago. A lot's changed since I had been here, but there are still some familiar faces. Sharon, who introduced me, was my thesis professor in graduate school. I see Jeff in the corner. Jeff, I had two studio semesters with Jeff Day. My uncle is here, who is an architect in Lincoln, who I worked for in graduate school. And I have a friend who I lived with at Abel Hall. So it's been a trip down memory lane. Before I get started, just curious, how many of you are undergraduates? Okay, graduates. All right, and how many of you are interior design? Okay, architecture? And is there other majors, landscape architecture, or anybody else other than interiors and architecture? All right, pretty good mix. So I graduated, or let's see, I'll start at the beginning here. So born and raised in Nebraska. I was born in Ceresco. I went to school in Wahoo, so I spent the first 24 years of my life within a half an hour of here, 45 minutes of here. I grew up in a very hands-on family. My grandparents farmed. My mom and dad would make crafts and are very artistic and hands-on people. I was always interested in architecture, even at a very young age. I would build small models and, kind of always knew I wanted to work with my hands and be very involved with whatever profession I went into. So I started school in 2001, kind of with a visual literacy, which was the program back then, which I learned embarrassingly enough by asking Nate's class how old they were in 2001, and I found out that most of them hadn't been born yet. So a lot has changed, but back in Vislit, it was like architecture, interior design, photography, graphic design. It was all the arts in one class, and it was a very, I don't want to say traumatic, but it was a bonding experience for everybody. And actually met my, who is now wife, I'll skip ahead here. Oops. I met my wife the very first day of school in Vislit. We didn't start dating until the last summer before she graduated. So we were just kind of friends for a long time. But let's see if this goes. So that's our family. That's Lisa. She graduated interior design and she works in Chicago at a design firm. Henry on the left came with me. Everett in the middle, 2.5 years old, and then our baby is Milo. So we met in college. During grad school, I worked at a small firm in Lincoln, SSH Architecture. I then went on to work for HDR in Chicago and started Icon Modern. So we'll kind of go through a little bit of my story here. Background in education, path and experience, intro to Icon Modern, and then some projects if we have time at the end. So kind of going back into school, I'm just going to touch on 3 projects very quickly, but they all kind of played a part in Icon Modern. So this was a project in the spring of 2005 with a visiting professor where we built this pavilion about 100 feet that way in the kind of what is now a dirt lot out there, but used to be park. And we designed, engineered, prototyped. It was mixed materials. It was a very hands-on project for a small class for a semester, and we installed it. So this could very well be an Icon Modern project now and kind of what it ended up looking like. There's another project I want to touch on, which was the summer before I was in 6th-year thesis. So I'd kind of known what my thesis project was going to be in. I had figured out what my interests were, and this was with Chris Ford, who I studied how you could use automobile parts in architecture because it was a lot of waste. There's junkyards full of cars. They're all made out of metal. So I spent a summer kind of looking at that as a case study specifically, and that kind of evolved into my thesis project, which was how to reuse common waste materials in architecture. I, of course, chose a project site in Chicago because my then girlfriend lived in Chicago and we were long distance, so I selfishly picked that site. But it was a low-income housing project that was being demolished, and I was kind of like fit my thesis concept. So I worked with Sharon on this project, and a lot of the things that I worked on in college did actually make an appearance in my professional career. I'll pass around some things just because I dug them out and it has a nice 2006 patina on it. But I had a couple little prints that I had done of some of these classes, and I have some materials that I'll pass around as well. But the reason I wanted to show you these 3 projects was because they all had a direct impact on a very kind of unique career that I went into. So kind of going ahead to my professional career. So I did, like I mentioned, I worked for my uncle at SSH Architecture in Lincoln here, and that was in grad school. And it was a great experience. I would advise if you're able to work an internship or even an actual job while you're in school, it very much prepares you for life after college. You'll get a good idea. I worked for a small company, a small architecture firm, and then I worked for HDR, which you all know is like a very large architecture firm. And there are advantages and disadvantages of both of those, or unique things that you can work on in both of those. And Kevin gave me a lot of kind of leeway and taught me things anywhere from a proposal to a set of CDs to going in, punch listing a project. And then when I got to HDR, I was working on huge projects out of the Chicago office. I worked on several projects for 4 or 5 years. So it was a more methodical pace. Very rewarding. For both of those places were very rewarding to work at, and I learned an incredible amount. But it was very much like working behind a computer. I'd work on renderings, I'd work on design work, I'd go out and have user group meetings and come back and take notes. It was very much like working on the traditional schematic design, conceptual design, design development, CAD or construction documents. And these were a couple of the projects that I worked on that were very large projects. In the top left corner, that was Argonne National Laboratory Energy Sciences Building. So the campus is 700 PhDs, and the people that occupied this building developed the Prius battery and a lot of the technology that goes into the electric vehicles. Bottom right, Condell Hospital. HDR is known for healthcare. I worked on a couple different hospitals while I was there. That's actually early designs of Strategic Command here in Nebraska. All of these projects were awesome to work on, but it didn't quite scratch the itch for me of being hands-on with my career. So throughout all of this, I was also in the Army National Guard. So we were in Able Hall, 2001, September 11th, and woke up and found out, the same way a lot of people did, about the Twin Towers going down. And I then enlisted in the Army National Guard in December of that same year. So I was just in the Cav here in Lincoln, and I was trying to balance architecture school with the Guard, and I ended up making a career out of it, and I retired in 2021. But it definitely, all of this kind of shaped my career. Here's some pictures from that. One of the things that I worked on was one of the last things was during COVID, when they changed the McCormick Center into a field hospital in preparation for what never really came to be. But we worked on some pretty interesting things over that period of time. And I had a lot of experience that I probably wouldn't have had outside of the military at a young age, which was pretty pivotal in starting a business. So as I had mentioned, I had a really good job. I had made some headway into a few of these projects that were starting to be built out. This was the Argonne National Laboratory project. It was probably 2012. In 2007, after moving to Chicago, I had the opportunity to design some furniture for contact of my wife's, who was a furniture rep. So, it's not a large stretch for a young architect, interior designer to jump on the opportunity to be able to design some furniture. And I did some work early on and presented it to a local kind of custom systems furniture manufacturer, and it didn't really end up going anywhere. I thought it was really interesting, but I always felt that my career would be in architecture. I'd gotten my master's, I'd worked through IDP and started taking the ARE, and I always felt like it was kind of fun to do on the side, but I was never really going to make a career out of it. I wanted to kind of be an architect and maybe start my own architecture firm someday. So I was kind of doing icon modern stuff while working at HDR and being in the Army. So I was spread pretty thin. It was all kind of a blur through college and through the early part of my career. So I spent about 6 years doing all of those things. And while Icon Modern was evolving, it was mainly my business partner and I, and we'd have meetings at a restaurant or bar. I was working, at home on stuff. That's the firstborn, that's Finn, our Frenchie, he's like 10. Our first office was like in the back of a box truck at these like furniture festivals. I forgot, so I wanted to put a plug in for Chicago. So if anybody's kind of considering what their next steps are after you graduate, Chicago is a great city to do architecture, interior design, product design, furniture design. And Chicago has the Merchandise Mart, it has Neocon, it really kind of like brings the entire country together for those things. So that was like our booth at Neocon, was that back of the box truck. That was probably like early 2007, 8, 9. We were starting to kind of like evolve our brand and mainly doing Starbucks work. We got really lucky in that Starbucks had a regional design center in Chicago. And we had the right contacts, and we pitched to them some of the ideas that we put together for the systems furniture, but we put a little unique spin on it in that we wanted to use reclaimed urban wood. So there was a lot of stories about the emerald ash borer, the elm kill beetle, all of these different trees coming down in Chicago for various reasons, and it was in the news. And it was an opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves from a lot of the other major manufacturers building furniture in Chicago, and Starbucks really gravitated to that. So by 2008, we were fabricating furniture for Starbucks in Chicago and kind of neighboring states, and it was slowly growing. They were predominantly our only customer, but we were doing a lot of locations, a lot of pieces of furniture for them. So I would do the drawings, the design work, some project management in the evenings and kind of keep everything going. And to kind of frame where my head was at and where the architecture field or architecture profession was at in like 2008 to 2012, you had the housing bubble bust. And it wasn't an easy time for architecture firms because there was a lot of projects that went on hold. We had a lot of rounds of layoffs. A lot of friends lost their jobs. There just wasn't a lot of work for people at that time. So I was kind of balancing that, working on those projects at HDR. Icon Modern is growing because you have Starbucks that is essentially growing the business for you. So it was very hard for me to decide which way to take my career because I was getting pulled one way, but my heart was maybe in architecture. I had really good mentorship. I had really good family support. I had, kind of an opportunity that a lot of people wouldn't have. And I remember I was at HDR, one of my last performance reviews. I had a mentor who was a project manager. He was about ready to retire. And I was like, I've been here a while. I've been doing the job of the person above me. What do I need to do to kind of get to that next level where I can lead a project or, be have a little bit more responsibility. And, simultaneously I'm in the Army and I'm in command of 120 people at under 30 years old. I'm like, I know I can do it. But he said, unfortunately you have to have gray hair. That's what he told me. And it was a lighthearted conversation, but he's like, you just need to pay your dues and you need to stick around a little while and it will come and be patient. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. So in 2012, 2013, I resigned and I decided, okay, I want to do Icon Modern full time. So there was, again, my business partner, myself, we had a few, we had a driver, we had accountant, but we were very small. And we had a very conservative approach to growing the business in that we didn't immediately develop our own or fund our own shop. We've partnered with small shops. We didn't spend a ton of money on a new space. We just kind of worked from home. And we had this kind of niche where we were trying to do things that were different than everybody else with the reclaimed urban wood, with, that's a water tower that was deconstructed on a, 12-story building in Chicago that they were going to throw away, that we got this material. Some of it's out on the display out there. We were going to junkyards and pulling hoods and trunks off of old cars. And then we had the Starbucks work, which was the reclaimed urban wood. And we would brand that into every table. And we probably had 5,000 tables that we had made over that 5-year period. But it was pretty eye-opening to think that you were so reliant on one customer. It was a very good customer, but if they went away, we kind of would be in trouble. So one of the first things that we did when I came over was we need to kind of diversify what we do and who we call on. And I had worked in the architecture industry in Chicago. Lisa did as well. A lot of our friends went to Chicago after graduation. So we had this network of people that we knew at some of the largest firms in Chicago that we could call and say, hey, is there anything that we could do together? So the initial growth of the business was kind of relying on connections and personal connections of people that we knew in different firms. And we knew that we weren't going to be competitive with the major furniture manufacturers in Michigan, the All Steels and Herman Millers and the big systems furniture companies. So we were trying to fulfill this niche custom market. So early on, a lot of our product offerings revolved around these found objects, reused building materials, slab tables, live edge tables, a lot of metal and steel, the Motor City, which is the car hood kind of table. Buckthorn, modern, the twig tables, that's like an invasive weed that they cut out of park districts and golf courses and burn. So we were kind of scavenging materials to kind of build a company around. And a lot of the early story was kind of these products. So you can kind of see some of the materiality that we worked with and things that we made, and I'll kind of pass some of these around. So post-consumer recycled pressed skateboard material was something that we had worked with. The car hoods, it's sharp, so I won't pass it around. And then, wood and metal, different things. The bottom left is kind of that water tower material that I had showed you. Grain elevator material, barrel staves, bowling alley material. The top left I spoke about with the class yesterday. That was the crushed acorn in resin. So it was a lot of fun new materials, factory flooring. We made products out of them, and we made things out of found objects, and we had a pretty unique product mix. But we weren't terribly ambitious on the type of projects we were going after or the things that we were willing to make. And I feel having the background in architecture, practicing architecture, being kind of more hands-on with construction, I felt that we could do larger scale, more ambitious builds. So that's when we started kind of getting more into working directly with the designer early on in a project to try to engineer something and design something that would be in the specification and go out with the project to bid. So it would say, feature wall by Icon Modern, reception desk by Icon Modern. Instead of trying to sell just products, we were trying to sell a story. So we could help you design your space. We have the technical expertise to figure out how to build some of this more complex stuff. This was kind of our tagline after a few years, new kind of custom furniture and architectural elements company, infinite possibilities, one simple approach. We were very much like trying to sell a story instead of a product. So as time went on, we started hiring more and more people. We have a sales and marketing team. We have project managers. We have drafting and kind of like industrial design, product design. We have quite a few people in logistics. We have kind of your typical accounting, and then we have partner shops and we have in-house shops. So, my role has kind of evolved over the last several years from designing and managing projects to kind of running more of the business. So, like we might have to do, we have to estimate 4 times as much work as we do to get a job. So, there's a lot of work that goes into getting the work in the first place, processing the work, overseeing fabrication, being on the job site, overseeing installation. Those are all important aspects to kind of getting those relationships with the designers, the end users, the mill workers, the general contractors. Like, you really have to do a lot of that prep work to build the reputation to be able to be in position to make some of these things. So that's kind of how the company is structured. So in-house capabilities. So we really kind of like pride ourselves on working with the design team to have a collaborative approach to developing some of these products that we make. It's not uncommon for something to try to, for something to be value engineered out of a project. So if a designer comes up with this really complex focal point and then they go out to bid and the thing costs twice as much as what they're expecting, a lot of times it will go away. And what we're trying to communicate to them is that we can work with you to bring that back into the budget by making some, design modifications, changing materials, slightly adjusting sizes. So, at the end of the day, we want to be able to build that product for them, and we'll work with them to kind of get through that. We'll do all of our own drafting, rendering, prototyping. And then we have, again, wood shop, steel shop. We do work with mixed materials, which we'll get into. We do branding and signage, laser cutting, CNCing. At the beginning, we really focused primarily on the urban wood and the steel because the urban wood was our message, our differentiator, and really we only did steel as a means to like build bases for tables and supplemental pieces. And throughout the past several years, I think steel has now eclipsed wood for us as like our most popular item to be building out of. There's a lot of, like you could see with the frame out there, which this is similar. It's just kind of the way that the industry has trended with trying to develop dividers, space dividers, movable pieces. Steel is an effective way, metal in general is an effective way to build some of those things instead of building walls and trying to define space with physical architecture. You can define space with some of this more flexible kind of like architectural elements. Being in Chicago and focusing on urban wood, you're very limited to kind of the species that grow in Chicago, or we get material sometimes from Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, but these are our go-to species. And if you have a chance to walk through the display, I brought some of them with. So an example of walnut, which is the darkest raw material that we have. And then again, the metalwork. So we have a metal shop with a powder coating oven, which allows us to kind of build everything in-house, finish it in-house. We predominantly work with steel, aluminum, some brass, a lot of inlay materials, mesh, perforated metal, expanded metal. Right now, it's extremely popular material selection. If you're kind of following the blogs and looking into your design and architectural record, you're going to see a lot of infill panels out of metal. It seems like we have multiple projects going on simultaneously with metal. And then, as I mentioned, we do a lot of other materials outside of our core. So these are materials outside of our core materials that we'll partner with or we'll bring in from other vendors. So stone, solid surface, concrete, glass, the highly specialized metals like the brasses and the bronze, a lot of veneer, laminate. I mentioned the car hoods and the skateboards, just as some examples of unique things that we work with. And this is a list of the kind of product set that we offer. A lot of things fall into these categories, and every once in a while we'll get something unique. But we really started around tables, conference tables, community tables. They're something that's kind of easy to build and easy to design, and there was a need for a lot of the larger, unique shaped pieces. We then evolved into doing more complicated things like reception desks, credenzas, stuff like that. And probably like 2017, 2018 really tried to push into more of the architectural elements that we found as like a differentiator. Again, there's not a lot of manufacturers that will do a custom architectural element that's outside of like your traditional millwork package. So we were doing space dividers, ceiling elements, large planter units. We got into feature walls. Branding and signage was something that we didn't chase. We were kind of brought into it because inevitably a designer would want their all of their space to match. So they'd want their tabletop material to match, maybe if they had their logo cut out of something in wood on the wall. It was kind of an upsell for us was to get on the project with the architect and then try to do as much as we could do. So we would try to, if we got called in for a boardroom table, we'd kind of look around the plan and be like, oh, what do you have over here? This looks like a really cool designed feature wall. Do you have anything in mind for that? Or have you seen, this product that we've worked on recently? It looks like it would kind of fit in this space well. So, we get on these projects and try to get as much work as we possibly could. And we'd probably have, on average, we'd have about 130 to 150 projects a year, and we'd have anything from a single table on a project to 15, 17 floors of furniture. So the scale varied quite a bit, and it was hard to manage the company and kind of manage cash flow, production, capacity, all of those things when you don't have control of what comes through the door and when it comes through the door. So there were times when we'd won a big project and we already had a couple in the queue, and I would rent a space just to do table assembly and storage. So we had to be pretty flexible early on, and throughout that time we would go from a 2,000 square foot office to then a 10,000 square foot office to now in a 15,000 square foot standalone building, which at each step you feel a little bit more grown up, but even now I still feel like we're figuring it out and trying to experiment as we go, and we're not quite where we want to be. But then I look at some of the things that we've done and the clients that we've worked with, and I was telling these guys the other day, I don't think that there are bigger projects going on in Chicago that we're missing out on. So we're very, very fortunate that we can work on some of the kind of coolest projects. I skipped over a lot of the things that I talked about in class yesterday because I talked for an hour, and I was worried I was going to go over. But at least today we'll have a little bit more time to actually look at some of the projects and products. Before I go into projects, does anybody have any questions on kind of the beginnings of Icon Modern or my path or experiences or anything that caught anybody's eye?
Something that I think is interesting, we've talked a little bit in some of my classes that I teach about the idea that you're wearing like multiple hats at any given moment in the day. Would you be willing to talk just a little bit about your life-work balance?
Yeah, good thing you asked me and not Lisa. It's tough. I'm born and raised small town Nebraska, so no matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it all in and work as hard as I can at it, which was very challenging there for a while because I had a lot of different passions. I had a bunch of different things going on, and now that it worked out for me in that when I was wrapping up the Army is when I started having kids. So I had kids later in life because I think if I had kids early on, I probably wouldn't have been able to do everything that I did because they're my complete focus at this point. But you do wear a lot of different hats, and you have to learn how to prioritize. And everybody wants to kind of advance their career and have set yourself up as best as possible to move forward. But this is a passion project for me. I go into work at night after I put the kids to bed. My oldest son has a little shop in my shop that we built him that's got pegboard inside of it. So when Dad has to go to work, I built him a sandbox. I built him a little shop, and he has probably got more shop time than some of my people in the office. But when you really love and care about what you do, it just kind of comes naturally, and at least for me with Icon Modern. And I feel like my team, we have a really good team. There's like a dozen of us in the office, and I personally feel responsible for maintaining their employment and keeping food on their table and their kids' tables. And I keep that in mind when I make decisions for the company and try to provide direction for the company. But for me personally, wearing the multiple hats is what I'm most comfortable with. Whether it be life as an architect when you're in that role, or in the military. It really, I feel like the combination of those two backgrounds set me up to be able to do this successfully. I think if I were missing one of those two key areas, I think if I didn't have an architectural background, I don't think I could do things like this confidently. I have done enough of this now that I feel like I could walk into any of my meetings without doing a lot of prep and being able to give them good advice on what to do. And I don't think if I had all of that additional responsibility in the military, I would necessarily feel comfortable managing my peers or people that might be senior to me in my business age-wise and experience-wise. So I do feel like that managing multiple hats thing comes with time and experience, but I was fortunate enough through my experiences to not be as nervous about that. Thanks.
I kind of want to build off on that. So I'm currently a full-time project manager at Stonebrook Exteriors, and I also have a background in architecture, graduated back in May. Product design and furniture design has always been something that's been pretty interesting too. I just competed in the architecture chair, didn't win, but I'm curious on kind of with trying to maintain that work-life balance and having those different passions while still like working full time. How? How did you?
Yeah, I guess it started like, it was tough in grad school because I was I worked for Kevin. I was in grad school. I was doing my thesis, and back then anyway, like it was pretty intense. We'd do all-nighters regularly, and I would do an all-nighter, and then I'd go to ROTC like PT in the Coliseum at like 5:30 in the morning. So I feel like I never kind of slowed down after that, but I do recognize in like having people that I work with, that multiple generations, that maybe that that focus on the work-life balance that we didn't prioritize as well as this upcoming generation is doing. I have guys that like I'd really like you to stay and finish this project, but they're like, I'm done. I'm going to go home. I'm like, well, I honestly respect that because I gotten burned out at multiple times, and I pushed myself to the extreme. I think it's ultimately doing what's most comfortable for you as an individual. But I always looked at it like the harder I work. I wasn't more talented than anybody in my class. I didn't have funding in the bank to do icon monitoring. The only differentiator for me was like working harder than a lot of them. So I felt like I was just going to power through and figure it out. Was my motto, but that drove Lisa crazy a ton. Yeah. So you do have to have a healthy balance to succeed. And my hope was that I put in that effort in the past, so that now going forward, when I have my kids and my businesses established, I can kind of reap the rewards going forward.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, so we could talk about some projects. This project was for Caterpillar, as you can tell by the oil filters that are in there. Caterpillar was a really good project for us in that we did an office for them in 2017. We did an office for them in 2021. They called recently because they're moving their office. So part of our story is, we make things out of very durable materials. You're talking like 2-inch thick wood, hardwood material. You're talking steel, things that can be refinished and last a long time and are sustainable. And sustainability is a huge part of our company. Working with found objects like, these pieces here were Caterpillar in Peoria was moving an office to downtown Chicago, and those are all like old mahogany molds of parts that they would make of gears and different components of their equipment. And they found crates of them, and like, we don't know what to do with this, but it's really cool, and we like it in our boardroom. They sent us treads from track vehicle tires. They sent all of these oil filters. And we had a lot of fun with like working with their found objects, if you will, and putting them back into their space. And then we also did things like this hot rolled steel islands and dividers and just standard furniture and things like that. But we pride ourselves on kind of like winning that client over and then trying to grow with them. So as they moved around different office spaces, they're moving their boardroom table. They reached out to us because they scratched it up and moving it, and they're like, do we have to get rid of it and order a new one? I'm like, no, you can send it back to us. We'll refinish it, and it'll be just as new when it goes back to your new office. Another project. Are you guys familiar with like the Corn Cob Towers in Chicago on the river? They're very famous, River City Marina. So this is a building designed by the same architect that exists a little bit further south on the South Branch that we did a lobby space for. So as I mentioned, our projects can be very small, single community table or conference table, and then very large. So this project had like 5,000 wood slats that they were trying to like partition off the lobby from back of house space. They went through this major renovation to have that stair. We did the stair treads and landings, all of the flooring, some furniture, the slat project. So, I mentioned wearing the several hats, and our project managers do have to do that. So like, this was one of my projects. This was before COVID. And I was up on the scissor lift with the installers looking up above those ACT ceiling tiles to figure out how we're going to connect all this structure before we even started on anything. I was there during installation of all of these pieces. I was helping build the prototypes of the different configurations of the slats and the moss and figuring out how everything goes together. It's kind of an example of an architectural element, but it's really kind of like a product when you break it down to its simplest aspect. But we've done a lot of these large-scale installations, which is nice. And again, I feel like I'm as involved in the architecture industry because I'm working with all of these design firms on these feature spaces for their clients. So I don't really feel like I've lost out on that by kind of adapting my career. This is an example. So Sterling Bay is a developer in Chicago, and they're developing actually the area that my thesis project site was on. It's demolished now. It's on the north side. It's along the river. It's prime real estate, but it's because of politics been slow to develop. But they brought us into. We've worked with them for a long time, but most recently they were doing a marketing center for the Lincoln Yards development, and they're really good about when they purchase a building and do a renovation. If they find something that's cool in that building, they'll hold on to it. So on the left-hand side, this is a West Loop office, and they found these old crates in there, the military crates. So we're trying to figure out how we could disassemble them and put them back into the space as kind of a divider wall. So there's a few areas that had these like crates welded onto this metal frame. And then on the right-hand side here, we did a marketing center for them for the Lincoln Yards development. And that spoke there was from the building was a fire station. And that spoke is how they used to hang the hoses from the second floor of the building to dry out all the hoses after they had run them. And they wanted to keep that in the building. They didn't necessarily know what they wanted to do with it. So, it evolved into this like chandelier project that's kind of right as you walk in. And then we did like a 12-foot by 12-foot map where this is that water tower material that I've talked about a few times, Core 10 steel, hot rolled steel. We CNC'd veneered panels, laser cut all the metal. And it was all being able to be removed as it got developed, and they were kind of like Velcroed in place. So some pretty fun projects. This one I think appeared in your class with Lindsay if you're in the acoustics class, but we built a greenhouse or a conference room that looked like a greenhouse inside of an office space where there was nothing was square about it. So another project that required a lot of coordination, modeling, prototyping, on-site development. Our projects all move very fast. Like you can't build this in advance, send it to the job site and hope that it's going to all fit. Like it's very specific to the job site. There's no two things that are, in the right plane. They're building that header up above the peak of this greenhouse, as we're building the frame of the thing. So we're doing some very fun, call it a product, but it's really architecture. In addition to that, on this job, we'll do planters. We did the reception desk. We do, all kind of different, more typical things. We had the outdoor table on this one as well. And then, let's see, we have a few more minutes. I'll just kind of speed through our office. So about 1.5 years ago, we moved to a new space in the West Loop. If anybody goes to Chicago, I put some business cards on the frame out there. If you have a desire to look into Chicago for internship or for a job, keep my contact information and reach out. But this is our West Loop office. Our desks are over here. You walk in right here. We have conference room and restrooms on this side. But we wanted to feel very natural. Biophilia is a huge thing, so you have a lot of plants and planters, and we designed everything in here. But we still have our story. So we have all of these wood racks on this side of the material. That's all urban wood. So we have clients that will come in and we'll filter through boards so they can select the wood that they want to use for their project. Still tried to have an element of design in our space. Very popular right now. You'll see the totems, the stacked wood, kind of fun shaped pieces. So we have developed kind of a Central Park area down underneath the skylighted area. We have a lot of art, and we'll have kind of rotating furniture pieces in here. We try to turn it over every year or so to keep things relevant, and we'll design, engineer, fabricate all of these things in-house. We don't really do much seating. We'll do benches and stuff like that, but not much in the way of chairs. Again, we'll do a lot of mixed material, stone, glass. And then that was the most current photo of our team, our office team. And I sped through that, but I did get done by 4:50. So we have some time for. I have some other samples up here if anyone wants to see something on the way out. We have some laser cut stuff. We have some mixed materials, 4-bow linoleum, some literature, so feel free to stop and take a peek as you come through. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
I was just wondering, from like a size, like how many employees were there at the beginning, and how many is it now? And not just employees, I know there are probably a lot of other people involved too. It's not just the people working at the company, it's also other people that are connected to the company.
Yeah. We again, on our payroll, we have like 14 staff. We have a wood shop that has, at the height before the pandemic, was at like 12. Now it's closer to like 7 or 8. We have a metal shop that has 6, and then we have other partner shops that we work with really closely. That we have a closer relationship with, like a millwork shop, for example. We don't do traditional millwork, but we get asked to do it all the time, and it supplements some of the things that we do. So our network of people that we're very closely working with on a daily basis is probably about 30 people. And then early on, it was just Rocky and I, really, my business partner. We had an accountant that would run QuickBooks, but from 2013 to 2017, 2018, every year we kind of like doubled the size of the company from a sales and staff perspective. We just kept kind of growing and adding people on. We hit a roadblock in 2019, 2020 with the pandemic and things kind of shutting down for that year. But we were able to held on to our entire team, and have kind of finally recovered from that, and have grown a lot of our capabilities. We've kind of grown our office. So yeah, it's been a very organic growth, but we've taken kind of like a reactive approach to that. Like, we want to make sure the business is there before we really outstretch ourselves. So we've kind of let things get a little uncomfortable from a sales perspective before we backfill it with staff and space.
So I don't know if you went over this, but what was like your inspiration for even starting Icon? Or like what made you even think like, oh, I want to start a company?
I always wanted to do like something entrepreneurial. I didn't necessarily know if it was going to be in architecture or something else, but I didn't really anticipate it going down the furniture line. But I would say it was more of like an opportunity that came up than like a specific event that happened, or like an epiphany. I had that opportunity to design furniture. I saw that I could be successful doing it, and we were talking about this at lunch. It was just kind of a series of events that had to hit at the right time, whether it was the economy, whether it was Lisa getting a really good job and I could take a step away from architecture. It was just so one of our first professional meetings was with Twitter. Twitter was bringing her firm was designing Twitter, and they wanted to find some local company that could build some pretty unique things. And she upsold us, and she's like, you should check out Icon Modern. My husband owns this company, and they're up and coming, and they can do whatever you want. And we didn't really even have an office. Like, we had a space adjacent to our shop that was not utilized. It was about 2,500 square foot. It was a cool space, and we had a lot of product and stuff that we had made over the years. So the 2 weeks leading up to that meeting, we were up every night and we made a showroom, to the point where like I installed the bathroom fixtures the night before we had the meeting. Like, the paint was wet on the walls when they walked in. So I think there was enough things that happened like that we made it work, that gave us enough confidence to just say, okay, we can figure this out. What are the questions?
Your choice change from your favorite project?
I looked at a bunch of them, and I did. So I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned or not, but Goose Island Brewing is a Chicago brewery that's down the street from us that we have done some really fun things with them. And I think it's my favorite project because I can walk to it and get a beer. So we built huge countertop, bar top for them. We built out their office with some amazing, enormous walnuts or elm slabs. But they've been a a loyal customer of ours. And if you go to Chicago, if you go to a concert, the Salt Shed is like this new space, a concert venue space on the north side, and we built out that for them as well. So I'm going to say Goose Island because I can have a beer there.
Is there a material that you have not worked with so far that you're interested in or curious about working with?
I was asked yesterday if there's a material I don't like to work with, so let's see. Do you have any recommendations? You got all of them in front of you there. No, the nice thing about not having a product line is that we get pulled where the architecture design firms take us. So there are instances where somebody will come to us with the material that I haven't worked with or I haven't seen before and make that introduction. And if it works out well, at one point, somebody brought, I think it was Rivian. We did Rivian's office in Bloomington, but they wanted Forbo, the linoleum product, on the top of all of their cafe tables. They must have done it in California where they started, and I hadn't done a lot of it. I was worried about wood expanding, contracting, and this kind of like sheet good material maybe not moving with it. But there are instances like that where people will bring something fun to us and it goes well, and we've done more of it since then. And as far as materials I don't like to work with, it's really tough. Like I talked yesterday about the patinas, the hand applied finishes, anything that's like construed as art that can have you send it out of the shop and you're like, home run, this project turned out great. Somebody gets it and they're like, not really what I was expecting. Like, that sucks. I probably won't do any more car hoods because there's not too many 80s and 90s cars in Chicago lots. We're having to get them from Arizona and Texas, and they're really cool. I did it, during my thesis. We sold lots and lots of them to General Motors and Whole Foods in Detroit, and they're really fun because you sand them back, you get all the old colors of all the cars. It is like art, but if I didn't see another one of these, I probably would be okay with it. Somebody else had their hand up? Oh.
So you did mention just like icon monitoring, like struggling throughout like COVID and all that stuff, and I know that like a ton of like furniture manufacturers like did struggle just with like getting materials, and like that was like the big holdup. How was that different for you guys, since like you guys do find materials in a 100-mile radius? Like was that different? And like
no, it saved us, to be honest, because when a major manufacturer had something held up at a dock or at customs or wherever things were being held, and they weren't going to get their product in time, we got a lot of calls to say, can you guys make this table in 5 weeks? So it helped us a lot because our lumber was available. Metal pricing went up tremendously, but it was still available. We make a lot of cafe tables, and a lot of times we'll buy the base, and we weren't able to offer like a lot of the stuff that's cast overseas and things like that. But for the most part, it was to our advantage that we were like this local sustainable furniture company. The hard part was people were just afraid to do projects. A lot of them were being VE'd down to bare bones. Buildings weren't being occupied, so the major owners of these downtown buildings in Chicago weren't doing much, and even now are still kind of hesitant. You guys will have interesting careers coming out of school at this time, and kind of trying to figure out what the architectural industry, what the workspace is going to be like. I'm sure you guys talk about that all the time, but like for us, when we do Google's office or Uber's office or these big tech firms in Chicago, it's less about the desking and more about the amenities, because they want the best talent. They want people to come into the office. So, we'll do kitchens on every floor of Google's office space, like food for their employees to come eat. We'll do amenity spaces in all the buildings of like really highly finished elevator lobbies and stuff like that. So it will be interesting to see how that evolves, and you guys will be in the heart of it. Yeah, every once in a while we have to go outside of our little world for materials. Like I had a job, just received the slabs last week where they wanted like 30-inch wide slab that was 12 feet long. That was a book match pair because they wanted to send this to like a restaurant in Utah, high-end restaurant in Utah. I'm like, trees in Chicago don't grow that big. So yeah, we had to go to Indiana to get that. But I would say the overwhelming majority we were able to, it's great. Chicago is a hub for everything, architectural and product and furniture design materials. So it didn't stretch us too thin.
I'm really curious about your designs and if your portfolio represents your furniture designs or if you work with other designers and you mentioned like you switch out your showroom to stay current, and I'm just curious, like, are these forms your voice and your intention, or if you could just
We don't, like I said, we don't have a product line, but we have products that we make over and over and over that we initiated the design on. So there are a lot of things that, I or somebody on my team have designed and engineered and we've produced. But the overwhelming majority of what we do now, because of our nature as like a custom furniture manufacturer, is like the initial vision comes from the interior designer or the architect. When we do get the ability to do our own design work is usually when the end user comes to us. So if like, somebody comes to us that can't quite afford an interior designer architect and wants something, that's when we get to kind of have fun and do the design work ourselves. But the majority of it is like interior design architect has an inspiration image, has a sketch, maybe has an elevation plan, and that's about as far as it gets baked before somebody comes to us. And we kind of refine the design with them. We apply materiality to it. We make it buildable. We engineer it. We get it to a point that it could fit within the project budget. So it's not as there's not a lot of jobs out there where you just get to focus on design. If you can land one of those jobs, that's awesome. But there's so many other things that go to it, but doing the custom work and having that wide range of clients and firms that we work with, we do get those opportunities on a daily basis, so it is pretty fun. So now we have reps in a couple outside territories, and our message is really hard to communicate unless you kind of came up with it. So we have a rep group in Detroit, and it's hard for them to be like, Icon Modern can do anything. They just call them, they can do anything. So I think what we'll probably gravitate towards is more of a product line that they can sell a little bit, they can wrap their heads around it, kind of explain it, sell it a little bit easier. But it won't be like a traditional product line. It will fulfill kind of like the ancillary planters, dividers, ceiling elements. So we're trying to put it together a cohesive product mix for that we can kind of send out to some of the areas where we don't have boots on the ground. We can't go out there and field measure. We can hopefully increase our sales with things that we want to make across the country. So I think we'll get there. Yeah, I think my family would love it if I expanded to Nebraska. It's hard because it's so personalized to the crew that we have. I was telling the group, like, we always told ourselves when we were ready to move to the suburbs in Chicago, we'd move to Nebraska, we'd move back home, and lo and behold, our careers taken us to kind of be rooted in Chicago. But I've given a lot of thought, like, it's cheaper to build things here. There's a lot of skilled tradespeople. I think I could build things here and still be headquartered out of Chicago. But because of our message and because of how long it takes to kind of like have that relationship developed with an architecture firm, it's hard to just say we'd like to expand to a different city. But we do have the reps in a couple territories that we're kind of using as a test to see where it goes.
I was wondering, how do you go about like applying the materials to your work and like the time and like cost and like specialization that goes into like using and working with these new materials?
Yeah, it does take a lot of work, and there's certain criteria that we look at to figure out if it's worth it. Like we do everything custom, but we try not to totally reinvent the wheel every time because we're trying to be profitable and efficient with what we do. So there are opportunities that come to us, and we just have to say like, not a good fit. We're not going to go down that path. And there's other opportunities that come to us, and we're like, okay, yeah, this is the way the industry is going. We need to figure out. We need to buy a laser because we need to learn how to be able to laser cut metal. We need to, like adapt to some of the the trends change. So we tried to build our business and our shops up to be flexible. So, you didn't have a machine that only made one part. You had like a skilled person that could kind of adapt to what the trends were. So, we did so many of the live edge tables that then kind of fell off for a while. Now we're coming back. And in the meantime, we then had to do more clean oak veneered stuff, mitered edges, streamline. So yeah, it's a process to kind of work through, but again, we kind of get pulled on the front end of the trends through the Chicago design community to kind of work with some of that stuff. So we can usually see it coming, but every once in a while there's a surprise material in there.
How has your business model changed, if at all, with the shift in work from home, future of work, where people are less likely to go to the office and see elaborate, great design?
It's so I'll answer in I guess two ways. So I have some people that work from home in my small group of people, but building an actual product, I need my project managers there. I need my shop guys there. I need my logistics guys there. So, in our world, it hasn't changed a ton in my day-to-day how I run my business. That said, the architecture industry and even the architecture firms working from home has made it incredibly difficult to get a rep or one of my salespeople in that architecture firm. Like they're taking fewer lunch and learns, they're taking fewer opportunities to go in and update their material libraries. They're working from home, they're not there, they're not conversing with each other and conversing with the material suppliers and product makers. So it has created a lot more challenge to like make those connections with architecture firms. And then the industry itself, I think we're seeing less desking, less private offices, more of those kind of, like I mentioned, amenity spaces, which is actually good for me because I do the weird kind of stuff that's customized and kind of is unique. So they're trying to put more of that stuff in the fewer offices that they're building that have smaller footprints versus, putting 3,000 desks in an office. You get 250 in a bunch of like casual meeting spaces and stuff like that, and they're trying to have a more flexible footprints. We're building mobile planters and mobile dividers, and I think it will be good for us. It's just maybe kind of like causing the industry a little while to catch up, and it'll again, another interesting thing that you guys will experience. Anybody else? I'll be around if you have any other questions too.
Let's thank